Hey guys, this is Mr. V over here to do a book review today for Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. You guys should know before I start my book review is that I do a spoiler-free book review, so that's why if you see me looking down occasionally, it's just I have notes so I don't give any spoilers away. So let's get into the book review for Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. So this book is described on the book jacket as a tale of injustice, heroism, and love follows the fortunes of Jean Valjean, an escaped convict determined to put his criminal past behind him, but his attempts to become a respected member of the community are constantly put under threat. So, that is the general description of what the book is, but it's much deeper, as you'll see in just a bit during my book review. So a few things you guys should know before even considering this book is that this book is a very long book. If you guys go to the bookstore, because depending on which translation you get, it's anywhere from 12 to 1500 pages. So that's why if you guys go to the bookstore, you guys should go check the book and you'll see how thick it is. And you just flip through it, just so you know. I read it on the Kindle, so that's why I don't have it here. But understand that it's a long book. I read the unabridged version, but I know there are abridged versions. I prefer always unabridged. And that's why, again, it's a long book. And that because of that, you do need patience. And I would say that you also need a plan to kind of stick it out in a way. Like, you need a plan to, stick with it. I've read, there are many people online that I've read that were like, oh, I got through the first 100 pages or 150 pages and I just quit or something like that. I don't recommend that. I recommend that you devote a certain amount of time before quitting or anything like that, because you do need patience in this book, and because a lot happens in the book. You definitely want to have a plan to stick it out, because a lot happens in the book. Because this takes place over a 30-year time frame. I don't know the exact thing, but it takes place over a long time frame, because there are multiple main characters and multiple different storylines. Yeah, they say that Jean Valjean is the main character, but there are multiple main characters. And again, there are multiple storylines. So that's why you definitely want to have a plan to stick it out and get through the book. That even though the story says that it's about Jean Valjean, a guy that he's released from prison, he's trying to almost rebuild himself, things like that, I would say it's so much deeper than just that. Because I wrote some things down that, in my opinion, about what this book is really about, is that this is a book, I said, it's a story of growing up of all ages and sexes. It's different points of life as they show a point of what it's like for kids. They show what it's like for teenagers. They show what it's like in your 30s and when you're in your 60s, all that kind of stuff. It shows at different points of all life. It shows misery in all forms. It shows happiness in all forms. It shows love in all forms. It shows how the rich have misery and the poor have misery in their mentality. And it shows the people who are selfish, and you can say the people that are selfless and who are unselfish and are so good. So it's there's just so much that goes on in this book. As I said, a lot happens, and you can see why it's such a long book. But that's why it's just, there's so many characters, so many storylines. But again, be aware, it is a long book, and that's why you want to have a plan, because it is a slow-moving book. This was released in the 1860s, so it's about 160 years ago. And, some of the books that I've read that were longer and from the time were a little slower moving as well. But you know what? It's a slower moving book, but I definitely think it's for a reason, because he develops a lot over those chapters. It's not like it's slow moving and nothing is happening. He is slowly developing a lot of stuff. It's because you're basically following certain people's lives, and that's why he starts to develop it, and he doesn't just instantly throw stuff at you. Yeah, there'll be some instant things, but it slowly develops into the full story, because you heard how much there is. And as I say again, a lot happens. But because of that he slowly develops it, I would say that, the writing style was great because he did great character development. He did an amazing job because even partway through, you know who the characters are. But it's like you slowly get to determine or slowly get to see who are these characters, who are these people, and you get to see that. And there are a lot of characters, but you get to see the insight to those characters. You get to see it through their dialogue and through what they do, and for some characters, what they're thinking, and all that, to where you really know the characters. And that's why he did an amazing job with that. And even like it just feels super real the way he does it, like even the thought process. I'll just give a quick storyline. I won't say who it happened to, but there was at one point a character was making a mental decision about if he should do something or not. If he should do, I'll just say, if he should do part A or not. And if he does part A, it destroys his life. But if he doesn't do part A, it destroys someone else's life. So it's like he's deciding what to do, and in his mind he is thinking, okay, yes, I should do it, or never mind, I shouldn't do it, and he keeps going back and forth. And I feel like the thought process and the way that he did it just felt super real, because that's the stuff that people would really go through. It's not as just so clean cut, and it shows that. And it's and the but you need to have great writing to capture this. And it's again, it just was well written, because he has great descriptions and characters. Because you already heard that he did great character development and the way he shows it, but he has great descriptions as well. Because like some of the things I wrote down, these are just a few, but it's like when a character feels sadness, it's like you want to help. Or he'll describe different areas, like he'll describe a garden, or at one point he describes the woods, and it's like when he's describing the woods, you like feel the darkness. It's almost like you can see it. And when he describes loneliness, you feel their loneliness. And it's stuff like that. Like it was done. Like he can just capture that. Like he can just do a couple sentences, capture you, and then describe it more. So, he just does so well with that. But because of that, you do feel many emotions throughout this book. You basically feel almost every type of emotion throughout the book, from happiness and anger and sadness. You feel so many throughout the book, because again, there are many storylines. But it's because of his amazing writing, and it definitely is a lot of fun. And when I was getting into the book, it's Les Miserables, but just like it translates to the miserable. But it made me wonder, like, okay, what is this fully going to be about? Especially when it's so big, Okay, what's going to really happen? And can you really keep you for that many pages? And he does. Because one really fun aspect is that he shows that misery comes in many forms. When I say fun, it's like it shows that it's like, okay, it's not just like one thing that happened to one person. It's like he shows how many forms of misery there are. That there's mental misery and physical misery, but that he also kind of reminds you about how many people struggle and the struggles that they go through and their thought process and what's happening and why. And it just shows a lot. And the different types of miserable situations for the different types of people, because he shows the misery in kids and homeless people and abandoned women and abandoned kids, abandoned men, how it is for the miserable for the criminals, or for the people that just got released from being a criminal, but also from innocents who are charged of a crime, and different misery for different religious sects and all that, but also the misery of the rich and the poor. I know that sounds silly for me to say the misery of the rich, but he shows that the rich do still go through miserable situations. Of course, everyone wants to be rich, but they don't have just such an easy life as he shows. And one fun thing is that he shows how evil the rich people can be, but he shows how evil the poor people can be as well. And I found that very fun, because most books only show the evil rich. They only do that. But he shows that there are evil poor people, which there are, because like there are poor people, the poor people in this book that will try to do scams, or they will fake injuries, or they will do stuff. And even when they're given a chance to get out of that type of lifestyle, they decide that they just want to keep running their scams or do stuff like that. So he shows that, and that's why it feels super real. And I'd say one of the best things about this book was that he shows a lot of great, I would say, like life lessons. And through this, a lot of times it's shown through like the characters and their events, but it also a lot of times is he just plainly states it. He'll show an event and then the character will just plainly state like, hey, it shows this. And I thought that the life lessons were amazing in this book. Like it reminds you so many things. And some of the life lessons I wrote down. I just want to briefly go over it, but it's like I already discussed that like misery comes in all forms, and that but that even though misery comes in all forms, and it's sad when people go through misery, that it does make people stronger, and that it makes people sometimes more understanding of people who are going through misery as well. Like later on in life, they're like, oh yeah, I remember when I was going through a bad time, and they can sometimes be a little sympathetic. And that does happen in real life, but that we also don't know others' misery. There's jealous people in this book, and that's everyday life. There's jealousy issues and all that. But he's like, people don't wear like misery badges. So we don't really know the true misery people are going through. And that's why sometimes people were like jealous of one another, but they didn't realize how miserable the other person's life was, or how they had just come from something really miserable. So, it's things like that, and that, oh yeah, material objects only give a certain amount of happiness, and it is true that money cannot buy you happiness. It's like some of the people, if they get wealth, it's like they can't just buy happiness. And he says in there that the type of happiness that is best is the mental happiness. And they even put questions like, what is happiness? And he also says it's like happiness is true love. Is true love not only for others, but for yourself. As there sometimes will be characters that love others so much, but then they hate themselves. Or there's others that just love themselves and everyone hates them. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. But he's like, what is true happiness? And that's why in the book he even says that love is an achievement, because it's not easy to love yourself and to love others and be loved by others. And that's one of the main cores of the book. And it's like it definitely makes you appreciate the good things that you have, and that's why that's what I said, some of the life lessons were amazing in the book. And then now for some of the stuff I did not like about the book. So one thing I had already covered was that this is a very long book. So because of that, it does drag at times. It will definitely drag at times. But the biggest area that people have problems with this book, and there are many people online that have stated this, if you watch other reviews, they state the same, is that this book will sometimes go so off course, and Victor Hugo will for some reason go into like some crazy tangent that goes way off course. It basically it will have like nothing to do with the story, or it has almost nothing to do with the story, and he'll go way off course, devote a whole chapter. And when I say a chapter, he's devoting 60 or 80 pages to some of these things that go way off course, have nothing to do with the characters. And he also expresses his opinion in that, but it's like some of it, he'll explain like the French Revolution. This is the 1860s, so the French Revolution had happened years before, but it's like he'll explain some of those things, but then he'll go and devote a really long chapter to like a battle, and there's none of the characters in there, and he's just describing the battle. Or that he's describing things like the sewage system in France, or convents, or things like that. And it's like, yeah, maybe there is someone in the sewer, but you don't need to devote a whole chapter. You don't need to devote 50 pages to describing what the sewage system is like in France. And a lot of people have said that, yeah, he just goes way off course. And that, again, there's like no characters involved. He's just kind of giving you the information. And maybe readers in the 1860s and 70s would have appreciated it more, because this was 160 years ago. Maybe they would have appreciated it more because, you know, they were living through that and all that. And he says his opinion. Maybe they would have appreciated more, but I can see why some people recommend the abridged version. I always get the unabridged version, but I can see why some people would, because there are areas where he just goes way off on these tangents, and there's multiple. So just be aware of that. That was one thing that I had heard about, and then I experienced. I still read the full chapters, but I saw it was that way because one difficult part for the chapters was that, like, I would say that some of it had almost like a confusing beginning, because it would be like he would start with a character, then he would go way off course on his tangent, but then he would like loop it back to the character, to where that's why I didn't skip any of the chapters or anything like that. But sometimes he would start with a character, then go way off on his tangent, and then not return to the character until the next chapter. You know, so that was a humongous complaint. And then the only other complaint I had was that there were a lot of characters in this. I mean, you saw how many pages it is. There's a lot of characters, and it was sometimes difficult. I'm not good with the names, but also it was difficult because sometimes it would be like the character would disappear for like 200, 250 pages, and you would forget who the character was when he came back. So, you know, that's a difficult part. But overall, I felt this was a great book because I still thought the story with the characters, I'm saying not the tangent, but the story where there was the actual characters in there, you know, it was amazing, and it kept you wanting more, and there was a lot of wonder about what's going to happen, and there were so many fun storylines in there, and you kept just wondering like what's going to happen, which was amazing, and he just kept it very interesting. And he did give a lot of great life lessons, and you know, that is a lot of fun when reading a book. So anyway, I'm going to give it my official rating now. I always rate my books on a scale of 0 to 10. A 0 is an awful book, a 5 is an average, and a 10 is phenomenal book. If it gets a 10 or anywhere close to a 10, that should be your next read, because again, a 5's average, and I'm known to be a tough critic, because I feel that many books are basically average. But if you go back to other book reviews, you'll see I'm a very tough critic. So again, a 5's average, and it's hard to move up even 1 point. So my official rating for this one was very difficult, because you heard some of the great, but you also heard some of the bad. And that's why this book was so difficult to rate for me, because I was debating between 2 ratings, but I'm going to up it a bit, where I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. Remember, a 5's average, but I'm going to give it an 8, which in my rating system is pretty high. That's actually considered very high in my rating system. So I'm going to give it an 8. I almost gave it a 7.5 just because I had to go through. He just went way off on some of these tangents, and he could have cut some of that out, or there's other things he could have done, which I can't say. But I still decided to up it a bit and give it an 8 because it does make you thankful for life and like what you have. And it makes you appreciate, it makes you basically just appreciate what you have. And, you know, a lot of those life lessons or whatever, they're going to stick with you. You know, those are the things that they stick with you. I mean, even though you know of it, it is fun reading it. Even though it's fictional, it's fun reading it. And it kind of reminds you of that. So that's why I was going to give it a 7.5, but I upped it to an 8 just because they offered a lot of great. But if you guys have any comments, you guys have any disagreements, questions, anything like that, please post it in the comments section below. I hope you guys click the subscribe button, as I always upload new, different book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy your reading.